Well, it appears you're getting a bonus video. Sir Owen Disney here, and you know what? We're actually going to talk about Halloween Horror Nights. And usually I would throw this video on, like, later in the week when I get some more concrete information. Oh no, I've spent the last 2 hours trying to decipher this, and you know what? We're going to lay this out on the line right here and right now. So, let's talk about a little speculation, shall we? Now, the first thing we get was a tweet. A tweet that was posted at 6:12 on the 28th, which was yesterday. And it said, at Horror Nights, which of course is the Twitter handle for John Murdy, who's in charge of Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood. He and I just finished a concept pitch with a studio. One down, right, Murdy? Question mark. And a wiki face. So obviously this means a couple of things. Number one, we're getting shared IPs this year, just like we did last year. Just like I predicted we would. And I'm sure everyone else did as well. And two, one down means there may be more than one shared IP between Orlando and Hollywood. And I truly believe that's going to be the case. Now, at 8:58 p.m., so a couple hours later, everything started. When a tweet was posted, once again by John Murdy, saying the code name for the first maze is Malcolm. Why? Well, the hint is specific to a famous Malcolm. It will all make sense later. Stay tuned. So, then he decided he wanted to start posting a couple of things, basically. He said before all this happened, before he even threw out the code name, he said a couple of things. Like, before I release the code name for the first maze, be ye warned, you will never figure this out. Never, never, never. Mwahaha, hashtag Carney. Well, I guess it helps that Sir Owen Disney knows the way of the Carney, being a former member of the professional wrestling business, so we run in the same circles, Mr. Murdy, and I know how to play your games. Now, I have spent a lot of time trying to decipher this, and I'm going to give you my ideas. But before that, he actually said the code name was pretty much a fake name for the maze, which we all know, but it does have some very tenuous, complicated connection to the real maze theme. Alright, people try to figure them out, but it frustrates them, and it's designed to drive you mad. Now, Malcolm. Let's start with the obviosity, and we'll go into the obscure. Malcolm. Malcolm equals Malcolm McDowell. Now, the first thing that jumps to my mind is Alex DeLarge. Yes, we're getting a Clockwork Orange, and which would be phenomenal, and it would play really well in everything. But that's just on the surface. Although I would love to see a shared IP between Hollywood and Orlando for a Clockwork Orange, I think there's a little more to it than that. Number one, I'll throw out a shout out to Dr. Emmett Brown 1, who basically said that this is basically a futuristic society where anarchy rules. That's how a Clockwork Orange works out, which is a perfect way to describe the Purge. So, could Malcolm be the Purge? Obviously, Purge Anarchy just got pushed forward, as in it's going to be later in the year now. It's going to be in July instead of June, so it got pushed back a whole month. So, it's a possibility that we're talking about the Purge. Well, the Purge was a scare zone in Hollywood, and I believe that we are getting the Purge in Orlando this year, but I don't necessarily think this is the Purge. But, it's a good guess nonetheless. Another person on the forums decided they wanted to say that they throw out the Kubrick connection. And Clockwork Orange was directed by Stanley Kubrick, and Kubrick also did The Shining, which means we're getting a Shining shared IP. As much as I'd like to see that happen, I don't think Stephen King is still coming to Halloween Horror Nights, at least not yet. I think within the next 5 years we get a Stephen King house of sorts, but I don't think it's this year. Okay. One thing outside of the box, Sir Owen Disney knows how to think outside of the box. Like I said, I'm a Carney too, Murdy, so we know how to roll this way. Maybe Malcolm is Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, Jeff Goldblum's character, which means maybe we're getting a Jurassic World scare zone or a maze, which is a possibility. Then again, if Orlando wanted to do Jurassic Park, I would think that means that this year we're getting 2 parks, because Hollywood's got Jurassic Park the ride, and Iowa has Jurassic Park the ride. It's a perfect place for the Jurassic Park maze. They've done it before in Iowa. I think this would be another way to go. That's probably not going to happen, because I think that probably Universal Studios Florida will host the event by itself again. Don't think we're getting a 2-park event, at least not yet. Maybe next year for the horror homecoming I was talking about in my previous video. 2, if you're talking about Jeff Goldblum, you're also talking about a classic horror film in The Fly. Well, maybe The Fly is the shared IP. I think The Fly may be a little bit too obscure to be the actual answer to this. Well, then we talk about a movie called In the Thick of It, and Peter Capaldi, who I know from In the Loop. Peter Capaldi also was one of the Doctors. Yes, could that mean that Malcolm equals Doctor Who? We finally be getting the Doctor Who maze that everybody has always wanted? Possibly. Not necessarily sure. Then there's, of course, another stab in the dark, kind of like, I want to throw a couple of these out here. There's a stab in the dark with Malcolm Reynolds, which is Nathan Fillion. Nathan Fillion, of course, is on Firefly, and he was in Dracula 2000. So, Dracula 2000 could be a Carney way of saying we're getting another Dracula house, or maybe getting another vampire house. Who knows, maybe it's the Lost Boys, like I thought that it was in my speculation video. Again, not too likely. Then Malcolm, I went to Malcolm X, and the various actors that have played Malcolm X throughout history. Now, Malcolm X was portrayed by James Earl Jones in a 1977 film called The Greatest. James Earl Jones was in The Exorcist 2. I know it's not connected to the first one, but it could be a roundabout way to get us to The Exorcist to be RIP, which I know both Hollywood and Orlando both want. That's a possibility. And the greatest voice actor that ever lived, Morgan Freeman, did Malcolm X in the 1981 television movie called Death of a Prophet. He was also in Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher was a Stephen King movie that starred Jason Lee, and Stephen King equals maybe another Stephen King property, another way. Well, don't think it's going to be King, so still there. The biggest one of all, Joe Morton played Malcolm X in a 2000 TV movie called Ali, An American Hero. He also was in this film in 1995, which was a war movie, kind of a black version of Vietnam, like a black version of the way it was seen in Vietnam, called The Walking Dead. And in this movie also starred Eddie Griffin, who people would know from Malcolm and Eddie. So a huge red flag went up and it said, well, maybe Malcolm is another roundabout way to get to The Walking Dead. I know it's a very obscure reference, but when you're a carny, you gotta throw out the not obvious. And then again, like I said, it's really out there, but you know, maybe that's the case. Then, of course, I went to the big one, and the big one is Malcolm in the Middle. Now, obviously, we've used television shows to get there before, like with the Name Game back in the day. And back in the day, I mean last year. I would say that Malcolm in the Middle is probably the direction we're going here. So, we start with Bryan Cranston, obviously. Now, everybody is like, that wants a Breaking Bad house. It doesn't fit Halloween Horror Nights, it's not going to work. But, Bryan Cranston was in a 1991 sci-fi flick called Dead Space. No connection whatsoever, but maybe Malcolm is our Dead Space video game house, finally. It's possible. So, of course, another thing I wanted to throw out to you guys as well. Hayden Panettiere. Well, she played Jessica on the show. She was in Scream 4. Maybe we're getting a Scream property, our first Scream property house in Orlando. Maybe that's going to happen. I know Scream did the Terror Tram in Hollywood, so I don't know if that would be the right direction. But then again, there was a tweet that was talking about a famous white mask. Could it be Ghostface Killer? It's possible. Now, David Anthony Higgins, who I know being a barista on Ellen's television show, he played Craig Feldspar. He's also on American Horror Story. So, maybe we're getting our American Horror Story shared IP that everyone and their mother think is going to happen. He was on Murder House, by the way, if you're curious. Emma Stone, of course, was on the show as well. She's in Zombieland. Maybe we're getting a Zombieland scare zone. Possibly. I don't know if we get a Zombieland house. It'd be pretty awesome, but I don't know. And Eric Nenninger played a character on the show. He was in Jeepers Creepers, too. I don't think that's going to be a possibility. But let's talk about a couple other things. When you talk about going back to the first, talking about Malcolm McDowell. Malcolm McDowell, of course, also is Dr. Samuel Loomis from Rob Zombie's Halloween remake. And, you know, everyone wants Halloween. It plays into the thing I said a few minutes ago about how a famous white mask will be coming to the event. Maybe it is finally us getting Halloween. It's a very good possibility. Sometimes carnies also use the obvious to trick their prey. Trust me, I've done it before. It's called misdirection, folks. It really is. When you think you're going in opposite direction, you're going on the path that they intended you to go on, because they intended you to go off that path. But you really just need to stay on the obvious and stick with what your gut tells you. Another thing Malcolm McDowell did was the Silent Hill Revelation 3D film. So that means maybe another Silent Hill house, since the first one failed. Probably doubtful. So, let's make a checklist, shall we? What is Malcolm? I gave you all sorts of reasons why. Malcolm could be Halloween. And I'm not talking about Zombies Halloween. I'm talking about John Carpenter's Halloween, which is what we've always wanted. It could be A Clockwork Orange, which is a possibility. It could be Jurassic Park, or Jurassic World in this case. Could be The Fly. Could be our Dead Space video game house. Could equal out to Scream. Could equal out to an American Horror Story. It might be Zombieland. It might be Jeepers Creepers. It might be Dracula, or another vampire-themed house. It could be Doctor Who. It could be Stephen King. And maybe The Exorcist in itself. It might be a literal code word for another Walking Dead house. The final Walking Dead house, this time in a soundstage. It gets us thinking, folks. That's what these code words are supposed to do. They get us thinking. I just threw out so many possibilities in this video. I can't say that there's no way that at least one of them has to be either correct or on the right track. So, that is my speculation for what Malcolm is. And I've done my homework, as you can tell. I went all the way from Malcolm X to Malcolm in the Middle to Malcolm and Eddie. And you know, this is all about buzz. And the world right now at large, all the Halloween Horror Night fanatics on both coasts are buzzed because of this. This one code word has shocked the Horror Nights community. And you know what? Getting us thinking this early is awesome. And I would have an issue with any of these houses being the potential. Like I said, I mean, you got Halloween, you've got Scream, you've got Doctor Who, you've got The Purge, you've got Dracula, I mean, Dead Space, Silent Hill, Jurassic Park, American Horror Story, Zombieland. These are all legitimate options. And who knows, maybe it really is an obvious answer and we're getting A Clockwork Orange, which would be awesome as a house. I would love that. But then again, A Clockwork Orange fits a scare zone better. And I think they really should do that someday down the road. Clockwork Orange scare zone. If they don't do a house, somebody do a scare zone. Makes sense. So what do we know, really, for right now? Well, all we know is basically speculation. But speculation is basically leading us toward the fact that we're getting The Purge in Orlando this year. And we're getting a sequel to Nightingales, it sounds like. Now, it's also sounding more and more likely that we're going to be getting The Walking Dead again. And at a soundstage like I believed it would be previously. I would say some more shared IPs with Hollywood. And I think Hollywood is actually going to get Cabin in the Woods and American Werewolf in London this year, personally. I think that makes total sense. I think that's probably what's going to happen. I know we were talking about Insidious, but I think Insidious was very too similar to Dead End for it to come in. But then again, I could be wrong. So it's a possibility. Who knows, we're still getting a Jack the Clown experience in a scare zone or a show or even in a house. Anything's possible. But like I said, I think 2015 is going to be the horror homecoming year. So, like I said, that's all just thoughts off the top of Sir Owen Disney's head. So hopefully I made you guys and girls out there think a little bit. And like John Murdy and Mike Aiello have done in the previous few tweets, just a few tweets has started a revolution in getting us all to think again about Halloween Horror Nights. So, once anything of worth comes up again, I will shoot you out another video. So, I want to thank everyone out there for watching. I want to throw a shout out to all my Horror Nights Updaters friends. Obviously, Dr. Emmett Brown 1 and Admiral HHN, and of course, my good friend Psychomassacre Films. All the Horror Nights Updaters. I want to throw out a shout out to Dr. Jimmy for continuing his awesome Horror Nights history, and I very much look forward to the next installment, and hopefully seeing all of you at Halloween Horror Nights 24 this year. So, in the meantime, if you like these videos, tell your friends about them, leave a comment, do subscribe, and help spread the word about Pop. If you'd like to like our Facebook fan page, it's Sir Owen Disney Pop. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, it's Owen Disney. If you'd like to tweet me, it's at Sir Owen Disney. And last but certainly not least, you want to send your thoughts, comments, queries, and opinions about ideas you have for Halloween Horror Nights 24. Speculation, ideas, and anything under the umbrella, you're more than welcome to. It is SirOwenDisney@gmail.com. In the meantime, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. And until tomorrow, boys and girls, that's all I got to say about that.